Chapter 7 The Roman Republic. In Chapter 6, we are in Greece. Now we're traveling to Rome, Italy, for Chapter 7. Rome sits on the western side of the boot-shaped peninsula of Italy. It is 20 miles inland of the Tiber River. No one really knows how or when Rome began. An ancient legend says that the twin brothers Romulus and Remus founded, or began, the city in 753 BC. According to this legend, the baby twins were left to die on the banks of the Tiber River. A she-wolf found them and cared for them. Then a shepherd killed the wolf and raised the twins as his sons. As men, Romulus and Remus built a city. They fought over who should rule. Romulus killed his brother, became king, and named the city Rome. Who were the Latins and the Etruscans? A group of people called Latins lived on the plains called Latium. This plain was located south of the Tiber River. This tribe called Latin, because they could not write, they have left us no written records. However, they did build small villages on hills near the Tiber. Rome grew from these settlements. People from Greece built several city-states on the southern coast of the Italian peninsula. They brought their Greek culture with them. The Latin people learned many things from their Greek neighbors. The Etruscans were a tribe of people who lived north of the Tiber. Like the Greeks, they were advanced, or beyond the beginning stage. They had a written language and made pottery and fine clothing. They were also sailors and traded throughout the Mediterranean. By 600 BC, the Etruscans had conquered Rome in the plain of Latium. They drained the marshes around Rome to create more living space. Etruscan kings ruled the Romans for more than a century. The king appointed men to a senate. The governing body helped make him decisions. The senate members, or patricians, also controlled large amounts of land. Since patrician is related to pater, the Latin word for father, they were thought to be the fathers of the state. In 509 BC, the patricians rebelled against the cruel Etruscan king. They defeated the king and set up a different kind of government, a republic. In a republic, citizens vote to elect representatives, or people who will speak and govern for them. In a republic, rule does not pass from parent to child. This Roman Republic lasted from 509 BC to 27 BC, almost 500 years. Who governed the Roman Republic? The Romans replaced the Etruscan king with two consuls. These leaders served the government for a one-year term. Each consul could veto, or say no to, a decision by the other consul. Serving 1 year in the threat of veto kept the consuls from becoming too powerful. The Roman Senate, made up of 300 patricians, helped the consul rule. It had the power to pass laws. In times of war, it could choose a dictator for 6 months. The kind of leader had full control of laws and ruled with force. What class ruled Rome? The Roman Republic was not a democracy because it allowed only patricians to vote. They were from the oldest and the richest families in Rome. This wealthy patrician class made up only 10% of the population, or all the people of Rome. Yet the patricians ran the government. They thought of themselves as the ruling class. Who were the plebeians? Most Romans were not wealthy. They were small farmers, merchants, and laborers, people who did hard work with their hands. Yet they were citizens of Rome. The Romans called them plebeians, which means from the common people. As citizens, the plebeians paid taxes and served in the army. They could not marry out of their class. Also, the patricians could sell plebeians into slavery if they did not pay their debts. They had little power alone, but as a group they were powerful. There were more plebeians than there were patricians. The upper classes tried to keep the plebeians happy with bread and circuses. In other words, the plebeians were given food and entertainment. How did the plebeians gain political rights? The plebeians had one important power. They were citizen soldiers. The patricians needed them to defend Rome against its enemies. In 494 BC, the Roman Republic gave the plebeians the right to elect or choose by voting two tribunes. These two representatives protected the rights of the plebeian class. As time passed, the number of tribunes increased from 2 to 10. They sat outside the door of the Senate and shouted "Veto" when they did not like a law that a patrician wanted. By 350 BC, the Senate could pass only those laws to which the tribunes said yes. What is the Law of 12 Tables? In the beginning of the Republic, the Senate did not write down the laws it passed. The plebeians were not sure what the laws were. As a result, patrician judges were unfair to plebeians. Soon they demanded that the Senate write the laws down. Around 450 BC, the Senate wrote their laws on 12 brass tablets. Then they put them in the marketplace. Every school child had to learn these laws. When did the Republic become more democratic? By 280 BC, Rome had become more democratic. Plebeians could hold political or governing offices. They could also serve in the Senate. In fact, one consul could come from the plebeian class. Still, problems continued between the patricians and the plebeians. This struggle became an important part of Roman history for several centuries. During the years of the Republic, Rome was often at war with its neighbors. First, the Romans defeated the Etruscans by the north. By 275 BC, they had conquered the Greeks in southern Italy. What caused the Punic Wars? To the south of Rome, on the northern coast of Africa, lay Carthage. The Phoenicians had settled Carthage and it had a powerful navy. It controlled northern Africa, Spain, and several islands close to Italy. Then, in 264 BC, Carthage tried to take control of all of Sicily, an island of the southern tip of Italy. This led to war. In fact, Rome and Carthage fought 3 wars that lasted over 100 years. The Romans called them the Punic Wars because Punicini is the Latin word for Phoenician. How did the Romans win the First Punic War? The First Punic War lasted 23 years from 264 BC to 241 BC. Carthage had a mighty or powerful navy. Also, its population of 250,000 was 3 times the size of Rome. Rome had a fine army but no navy. How could Rome defeat Carthage? The Romans added a plank or long, wide, flat piece of wood to their ships. Then they got close enough to the Carthaginian ship. The plank hooked it and linked the 2 ships together. Then the Roman soldiers ran across the plank and jumped down in their enemy's ship. In this clever way, the Roman army defeated the Carthaginian navy. In 241 BC, Carthage asked for peace. Rome took control of Sicily and the other islands off its coast. What did Hannibal do in the Second Punic War? In 218 BC, Hannibal, a great Carthaginian soldier, planned a bold attack on Rome. His army of 60,000 soldiers, 30 elephants, and many horses marched across Spain, over to the Pyrenees, to the foot of the Alps. The Romans thought that these mountains would protect them from the attack. For 2 weeks, his soldiers, elephants, and horses moved through narrow, snow-covered mountain paths. They faced snowstorms and bitter cold. Half of his men and most of the elephants died. Finally, Hannibal's army came down onto the northern plain of Italy. It attacked and defeated the surprised Romans. In less than 2 years, Hannibal defeated 3 more Roman armies. Filled with fear, the Romans retreated behind the strong walls of Rome. Even Hannibal could not knock them down. For 15 years, Hannibal's army moved up and down the Italian peninsula. It destroyed towns and farmland. Then, in a surprise move, the Romans crossed the Mediterranean and attacked Carthage in North Africa. Hannibal had to rush home to defend the city. In 202 BC, the Roman general Scipio defeated Hannibal's army at Zama. This ended the Second Punic War. Rome forced Carthage to destroy most of its navy and took control of Spain. What happened in the Third Punic War? The Third Punic War began in 149 BC. Carthage attacked an ally or friend of Rome. Rome then invaded Carthage. When the Romans cut off food supplies to the city, many Carthaginians starved to death. The Romans burned Carthage to the ground and sold its people into slavery. A legend says that the Romans covered the farmland outside the city with salt so that nothing would grow. Carthage was no more. By 133 BC, Rome controlled the Greek city-states in Asia Minor. It was the most powerful state in the Mediterranean area. The Romans even called this sea Mare Nostrum, which means our sea. Why did the Roman poor grow poorer? The early Roman Republic depended on its soldiers, who were free citizens. These citizen soldiers worked as farmers, laborers, and merchants when they were not fighting a war. Before Rome expanded, its citizen soldiers fought only in Italy. When a battle ended, they returned home. But as Rome grew more powerful, it had more territory to defend. Soldiers traveled overseas for long periods of time to fight. Citizens had to pay taxes to support the government. Many soldiers returned home to nothing because the government had sold their farms for unpaid taxes. Having no land, the farmers moved to the city. Jobs were hard to find because slaves were doing most of them. With no land and no jobs, many plebeians lost hope. To get a little money, they sold their votes to people running for political office. In this way, the rich became richer. The poor became poorer. What happened to those who helped the poor? In 134 BC, a tribune named Tiberius Gracchus tried to give public land to the poor. He said that soldiers who fought to protect the wealthy got nothing in return. The plebeians liked Gracchus, but the patrician senators or members of the Senate feared him. They started a riot, and Gracchus and his followers were killed. When Tiberius's brother Gaius was elected tribune in 123 BC, he too helped the poor plebeians. He was able to lower the price of grain for the poor. He also helped more people in Italy become citizens. But once again, the patrician senators stopped the reformer movement. They did not want change that would make things better for plebeians. Gaius Gracchus and several thousands of his followers were killed. How did military leaders gain power? The plebeians and the tribunes wanted reform. The patrician senators hated it. What happened? Military generals took power. In 110 BC, Marius, a popular army general, formed an army from the poor who had no land. He promised them a share of the money made from conquering other people. His army won victories in North Africa and Gaul. His soldiers were more loyal to him than to the Republic. In 88 BC, Lucius Sulla, another powerful general, challenged the power of Marius. War between followers of the two men began. Thousands of people died before Sulla defeated Marius and made himself dictator. By law, dictators had power for only 6 months. Sulla threw out this law so he could rule longer. Military generals continued to rule Rome until 27 BC. What was the first triumvirate? In 60 BC, 3 men agreed to rule Rome together: Crassus, a wealthy politician or government leader, and 2 generals, Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar. Caesar was elected consul. We call the rule by these men the first triumvirate. It lasted less than 10 years. Pompey feared Julius Caesar. He got the Senate to limit Caesar's power. In 49 BC, the Senate ordered Caesar to return to Rome without his army. He challenged their power by marching his army to the Rubicon River between Gaul and Italy, crossing it and marched on to Rome. Pompey fled. Caesar's army defeated Pompey's troops in Greece, Spain, and Egypt. Caesar had broken Roman law, but he had won power. How did Caesar use his power? Now Caesar had more power than the Senate. He gave jobs to the poor. He told the rich to stop wearing pearls and other signs of their wealth. He passed tougher laws against crime. He also forgave his old enemies and made them government officials. He also made the Roman calendar more accurate, or correct. People in Europe used his calendar for the next 1500 years. Who assassinated Julius Caesar? In 44 BC, the Senate made Caesar a dictator for life. Many artists carved statues of him, and people could see these everywhere in Rome. The government even stamped his face on Roman coins. Because of all this, some senators feared that they would lose their power. This would end the Republic. Some senators assassinated or killed him on March 15, 44 BC. These senators, some of them his friends, said that they had killed Caesar to save the Republic. Who formed the Second Triumvirate? After Caesar's death, fighting broke out. His 19-year-old son Octavian and two of his supporters, Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate. They divided the Roman Empire into three areas. Octavian ruled the west, Antony ruled the east, and Lepidus ruled North Africa. Each shared power over Italy. After Lepidus retired or gave up his job, Octavian and Mark Antony fought for complete power. How did Octavian become Rome's first emperor? Mark Antony formed an alliance with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. This upset Octavian because he feared that Antony and Cleopatra would create their own empire. Octavian asked the Senate to take away Antony's power. Then Octavian declared war on Antony and Cleopatra in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. The Romans defeated the Egyptians. After learning of their defeat, Antony and Cleopatra killed themselves. 4 years later, in 27 BC, the Roman Republic ended. The Senate made Octavian the emperor. For the next 500 years, emperors ruled Rome.